After so many years and after so many questions on whether or not this movie was going to exist, we finally got the sequel to Beetlejuice. I think this will sum up my review in a nutshell.
That was fun.
Now, before I talk about the Beetlejuice sequel, I think I should just give my overall thoughts on what I thought of the first movie, and also the director Tim Burton as well, because he does have an influence on me ever since my childhood. So, first Beetlejuice movie, do I even really need to explain why that movie's good? I mean, the movie is a masterpiece. I mean, it's got every Tim Burton quality to it. And it's the reason why I love the guy. Now, I grew up with Tim Burton, like I said. I watched Batman growing up. I watched Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, his claymations, Frankenweenie, Nightmare Before Christmas. I know he didn't direct it, but he was a part of it. And Corpse Bride, and a bunch of other movies. Dark Shadows, and he's made forgettable movies. He's Sleepy Hollow. I mean, you name it. Tim Burton is just such a unique filmmaker, and I really do like him. But unfortunately, the past couple of movies he has done before this were just letdowns. Alice in Wonderland, yeah, it's got his style to it, but I wasn't really too big into it. Dumbo, I didn't even bother to see, but just judging from the reviews, I know he strongly disliked it and just flat out disowns it, basically. And it makes me feel bad for the guy, because he really makes unique films and unique characters as well. Like, Edward Scissorhands is probably one of my favorites, next to Beetlejuice. So, I really do feel for the guy when it seems like, and I didn't see Wednesday yet. I know he was a big show. I know he was a big influence on the show. I know he did the couple of the episodes, I believe. So, knowing that this film was going to happen, I was really excited, but at the same time, very hesitant. And let me just tell you, boy, was I happy that I went in hesitant, because with the lowest of expectations, this movie blew me away. I mean, not only is this just a welcome return to form for Tim Burton, but it just seems like this is why I love Tim Burton in the first place. It's macabre, it's darkly funny, it's got his signature, look to it. I mean, it's got very bizarre moments, it's got really cool moments, it's got a lot of, just deadpan humor. I mean, you name it. Even the original Beetlejuice, this movie is a welcome return to form on why Tim Burton works for me. And why I love him. If you did not like the first Beetlejuice movie, or if you don't like Tim Burton, you're really not going to like this movie. Because this has this movie screams Tim Burton. And it was a joy to watch. Now, obviously, I have issues with it. I'm not going to say this isn't the greatest sequel of all time. There are moments in here that, yeah, I am going to be critical of, but I will say it is just such a fun theater-going experience. So, I just want to first off by point out, the performances. I really enjoyed them. Michael Keaton coming back as the role after nearly 40 years, he just fits right in. He just knows instantly how to act, and it's almost like he didn't age a day. If they made this in the early 2000s, or heck, if they made this in the 90s, you would think, wow, like he just jumped right into it. It's really cool just seeing him just having a blast. And not just Michael Keaton and even Tim Burton behind the camera, all the cast members seemingly have a blast. Cameo by Danny DeVito. He's in here for a hot moment, but you know what? He has a blast. And also Monica Bellucci as, Dolores, Beetlejuice's wife. She does, and her entrance is probably what hooked me into this movie. And it was just a fun sequence that involved a Bee Gees song with her putting herself back together. Minor spoilers. I'm going to try and stay away from spoilers as best as I can, but it was just a fun sequence. And it just brought a huge smile on my face. And although I did not like his character, Justin Theroux as Rory, he does a pretty decent job as just being this slimy, dislikable person. A lot. There is a lot that happens in this movie. This movie has a lot of plot. But before I get into that, another actor I just want to shout out is also Willem Dafoe. He plays, in the trailers or the footage, you would think he just plays a regular detective. He's not. He plays a stunt man that died from a failed stunt, and now he's just this detective, which is pretty silly, and he is having a blast. Now, like I said, all the Tim Burton qualities. It's got claymation. It's got, well, same thing. Stop motion, claymation, doesn't matter. It's got it. It is really cool. There's a flashback that happens that shows stop motion, which is really, really neat. The sandworms that show up here briefly in the third act and then briefly again in the final battle, they look just as good as ever. It is just phenomenal. I'm just going to say it. Especially in this day and age where, stop motion just kind of stopped being a thing. It looked fantastic. Especially since I saw this on the IMAX screen with my mom. It looked phenomenal. It was really cool to see it again. But like I said, even though I really liked this movie and thought it was a lot of fun, this movie does have issues. And possibly the biggest issue this movie has is pacing issues. I'll get more into it, but the other issue is it packs a lot of plot. Excuse me. It packs a lot of plot and a lot of characters and a lot of side stories that at times they just drop altogether, or just they don't have a big conclusion, so it leaves a few things open-ended, which is kind of disappointing. But the biggest thing for me is pacing. Near the end is where it kind of dragged quite a bit. There is a sequence, and if you remember the Deo dancing sequence from the original, which is instantly iconic, one of my favorite moments in any 80s movie, they do something somewhat similar near the final act, but it goes on, I'm just going to say it, for far too long. It is just, it was tedious. It was funny at first, but then I realized, oh, we're going to do the full song here. And yeah, it intercuts some sequences, but it is just, it keeps going. And it got to the point where I was like, it should have just ended after like a minute. 90 seconds would have been good as well, but it just didn't. It just kept going and going. And I don't know. It was just a very strange moment. And like I said, this movie is a mess. This movie has a lot of things going for it, but it's not a bad thing. What's disappointing specifically about Winona Ryder returning, her character, it's just really sad to see her character be this way. She has like a PTSD sort of, like, kind of like a, she has PTSD from Beetlejuice for obvious reasons. And, Rory, I'll get into one of the most bizarre moments in any film. Granted, I get it's a Tim Burton film, but it is such a bizarre moment, I just have to talk about it. But it's just disappointing to see Lydia grow up to be this very sad, dreary person, and not like the fun, depressed sad. Like, even when the characters in the movie goes like, man, why can't I have that Lydia back? And I'm like, exactly, why can't we have this Lydia back? Instead we get a more, it's just really disappointing to see how she ultimately ends up after so many years. But, of course, once the movie gets going, then I just kind of go like, you know what, I'm having fun with this movie. She's doing a pretty good job. I don't care. It's a Beetlejuice sequel, so I'm not going to be too critical of it. Back to Rory, as there is such a bizarre moment where, now granted, even in the third act, he gets his comeuppance ultimately. And I'll talk about the third act on what I thought about it ultimately, but let's just say there is a death in the movie. Like, ultimately that's what drives them back to the hometown and back to, the old house and everything is a death. I want you to take a wild guess who you think who ultimately died. I almost had a Porky Pig episode there for a minute. Well, the thing is, once that happens, there's a funeral, and then Rory decides, hey, I'm gonna marry you in 2 days because it'll be Halloween, because why not? And it's such a bizarre moment, even for Tim Burton. It took me out of the movie to the point where I was like, okay, I don't care how bizarre your universe is, I don't care how weird your world is, no one would think this is a good idea. I don't care how oblivious you are to reality, no one would think this is a bright idea, ever. But yet it happens. And it is so strange. It is so bizarre. And it took me out of the movie completely. But it was also kind of funny. And because the film juggles so much, it juggles, Dolores, who you think is going to be a villain. She briefly appears here and there. And then ultimately in the end, where I'm just going to bring up the final act, it ends so freaking quickly that I was just like, whoa, that was incredibly just underwhelming, but also anticlimactic. Like, it just seemed very quick and just like, oh, okay, like, that was fast and easy. And, and then Willem Dafoe, even though he's not in the film a whole lot, it's just weird whenever you keep cutting back and forth to him, and it's just, the movie juggles a lot, especially with a new character that they try and throw in a twist. I'm not going to spoil the twist. It's a pretty decent twist, I'm not going to lie, but another character, and it's a lot, and then that ends instantly, and it's just like, oh, okay, I would have liked a little bit more, but, it's whatever. Again, they are just brief moments, and again, you just kind of let it go because you're just having a fun time with this movie. But even with all that said, the movie's a ton of fun. Danny Elfman doing the soundtrack again, you're just instantly brought back to the first movie. From the very moment this movie opened, from the soundtrack and just the opening credits, I knew instantly this movie was just going to be fun. This was going to be a decent movie. And it was. I really did enjoy it. It was probably the most joy I had in a movie theater in a long, long time. Yeah, so I have my issues with it for obvious reasons. And, the issues can keep building the more I watch this. But you know what? If you like Beetlejuice, you like Tim Burton, or heck, if you like the actors even, go and see this movie. You'll have a fun time. Let's just hope maybe and considering the title and everything, I have hopes that there will be a sequel. But I'm not holding my breath. But you know what? It would be nice to have a third movie to cap off this trilogy. But with all that said, the movie's still tons of fun. I recommend going and seeing it, especially if you're a huge fan. I have issues with it, but I have a lot of praises for it. It's a fun time. Go watch it. That's about it. See ya.